Joining us now is Dr. Yaneer Bar-Yam. He's the founder of COVID Action Group and has studied pandemics for nearly 20 years. He's also developed a plan that would help get California to zero COVID cases in what he says is a matter of weeks. Doctor, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's talk a little bit about your plan, because I don't know anybody on planet Earth that isn't anxious to get to zero new cases so we can go back to our lives. What would your new plan entail?
So the main thing is, first of all, to realize that you can get to zero. And once you realize that, we really know what we have to do, which means that we have to do all of the things that we've been kind of doing halfway, but do them all the way. So we have to take the stay-at-home order really seriously. We have to protect people who catch the disease from infecting their families. So we want to do careful isolation and quarantines. And we have to make sure that when people go to the supermarket, they either do drive-by or curbside pickup or get home delivery so that they don't get infected and they don't infect from family to family. Once you do that, it's been really shown that you can, within a few weeks, it's like 5 weeks is a typical number, get the cases down really close to zero. So the challenge is, once we've done that, how do we stay there? And the answer is there are more pieces. One is that you have to contain the outbreak away from places that you've gotten to zero. So what you want to do is use travel restrictions. Again, you don't have to hermetically seal places, but you have to limit non-essential travel so that you can protect an area from being reinfected. And the other thing is that you have to have good contact tracing. It's like having firefighting to put out fires. So the point is that you treat the COVID epidemic like a fire, which California has a lot of experience with. We have a zero fire policy. We don't let the fire stay around and just burn and burn. We put it out. And if we get another fire, then we have to have firefighters to put it out. So that's what taking care of COVID looks like. It's a zero COVID policy.
Yeah, doctor, with all due respect, is this not a conversation we should have had a year ago?
I've been having this conversation with people starting a year ago. And in fact, there are major parts of the world that have done this, right? So, going back, at the beginning, China did this, and then Vietnam and South Korea did this, and then New Zealand and, Taiwan. So New Zealand and Australia, that are Western countries, did this. And really the problem has been that in the US and in Europe and in other places, there hasn't been experience with zoonotic outbreaks, right? These outbreaks are something we don't expect to happen here. And because we didn't expect it to happen here, we weren't prepared for it. We thought about it as the flu. We dealt with it as if we would done a flu outbreak. And sure, we should have had this conversation a year ago, but people didn't know that this was the problem. So now we have a year's worth of experience. We've seen that living with this virus doesn't work. The countries that have done it well, Australia and New Zealand as examples, they're living lives without the disease. So once in a while, they have a fire, they have a small outbreak, they put it out quickly, and they go back to normal. And this is what we should be doing too.
Yeah, in fairness, I think the Australia-New Zealand argument always kind of bothers me in that they're an island, and it would just seem easier to shut it all down. But let's assume that having this conversation now, you're going to get a lot of pushback with a state for sure that's had a year of sort of restrictions and shutdowns and reopens and shutdowns again, kids not in school. So let's assume you're going to get some pretty significant pushback for this theory. Could an argument not be made that with Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca coming on the market, that we're going to have enough vaccines fairly soon to have the same effect, possibly even a better effect than shutting down again?
Well, let me say, first of all, that Australia is larger than the continental United States. I don't know if you're aware of it, but it's very large. It's got 8 states, major cities, and there's a lot of transportation back and forth. So thinking about it as an island is probably not the right starting point. The second thing is that, in fact, the vaccine is not going to protect us for 6 months to a year. And even then, with the new variants, if we don't get rid of the virus, these variants we already have a weakening of the effectiveness of the vaccine for the South African variant, and the UK variant is more rapidly spreading, and it's going to take over the virus in the United States. So as we have one going down, we have the other one taking off, and it's going to hit the limits. Again, the hospitals are going to be overwhelmed, and so on. Why should we go there? So the answer is we can, within 5 weeks, get back to a state where we don't have the virus. It'll be even faster. And there are areas, I'm sure, of Palm Springs where there's low incidence of the disease, and maybe in 2 to 4 weeks, they're going to be out of it. And then you can protect them and keep going and clear other areas using extensive testing. So the idea that we should rely on a vaccine that's not going to be effective, surely not 6 months, maybe not a year, and maybe never, just like with flu, it's going to come back and back. If we treat this virus like the flu, it's going to treat us like the flu, only a lot worse. And that's not what we want. So yes, I'm sure there's going to be pushback, but I think that when people understand that this is a choice, that we can actually make this choice, that it's going to be clear that this is the best choice. And in fact, recently in Europe, this has become much more widely understood. So there's an editorial in The Lancet, which is one of the top medical journals, that basically says, now we realize that we should do elimination. And there are articles that are pointing to this in the British Medical Journal, and Germany and other European countries are having very broad and active discussions about doing this. Obviously, we hope that they will actually execute on that, but it's time for that discussion to happen in the United States. We can realize that this is not only the most desirable goal, which is obvious, but it's also an achievable goal. It's not even that hard, but we do have to recognize that if there's an exit, the door that has the sign exit on top of it, we're not going to be able to get out of this place unless we walk through the door.
Dr. Yaneer Bar-Yam, thank you so much, sir, for your time and your extra